Welcome to Labor's View. This show is brought to you by the very hardworking and dedicated employees of the Essex County Division of Welfare, who are members of the Communications Workers of America, Local 1081, our union. I'm president of the union, David Weiner, and host of our show, Labor's View. Today, we bring to you a very special guest for us, a young lady who goes by no last name, which is very intriguing, and her name is Angela. Hi, Angela.
How are you?
I'm David. We met, of course. Tell us as much about yourself as you want to, and as a way of segueing into what you do and what your issues are.
All right. I was raised here in Newark. I moved to Newark in 1991. I'm a first-generation Brazilian immigrant. I attended the public school systems of Newark, an Ann Street graduate. I completed my high school degree at science, went on to Essex County, and finished my bachelor's degree at Montclair State. I aspire to be a Newark public school teacher, and for the last 2 years have been petitioning the Board of Education for a job and have not been able to obtain one because of all the budget cuts.
Okay, well, that's very succinct. I can relate on a number of levels there in terms of having grown up in Newark as well, only up in the west and in Vailsburg. You're very involved with Occupy Newark. Why don't you give us an explanation about what the Occupy movement is in general, and then make it specific to the city of Newark?
Occupy is a movement of reoccupying your civic space, about addressing your community. It's about transferring yourself from the individualistic standpoint that we've maintained over these years back to a community, back to understanding that we need to cohabitate and coexist to be able to thrive together. Occupy at Occupy Wall Street started as a financial movement. I started participating within 3 days of Occupy Wall Street starting, going out there. And then I met a couple of individuals from Newark as well, and we started talking about the fact that Newark needed a lot of help, and we needed to reoccupy our civic space. But our grievances were unlike those of Wall Street. Our grievances were more local. Our grievances were the fact that we were losing our homes, and we were losing our schools, and we had no jobs, and our town was falling to pieces, and that we were the only ones that could start to address it because it was a communal issue. And so we started meeting at Peter Francisco Park, across the street from Penn Station. It was a handful of us, started discussing, well, what would we do and how we would pull this all through. Eventually, about 2 weeks into it, we decided to occupy Military Park. We chose Military Park because of its historical background. George Washington recruitment of soldiers for the Civil War here, the Vietnam protesters.
Revolutionary War.
Revolutionary War.
That's
Thank
okay.
you.
That's all right. Don't want to confuse our viewers.
I apologize for
all
that.
right.
And the fact that it sat in the middle of town. And we started speaking to people attending the POP rallies. I've attended Newark anti-violence rallies.
POP, People
of Organized Progress.
Right.
These
Larry
are
Ham.
Larry Ham.
Activist group, right.
These are individuals that throughout my life I've always seen, I've always respected. When I was in high school, I was very civically active. I participated in a lot of different organizations, and it kind of died out because of the whole college experience being so expensive and me having to work so much. But I found this as a way of giving back to my community, making a difference. My sister, who's 14, was attending science, but the economical situation here in Newark and the educational systems, everything's falling to pieces. No one's fighting for anybody anymore.
She was attending it while it's over on Rector Street, or the new one?
No, she's at the new one. She's 14 now.
Okay.
And something has to be done. This is our home. Just because your roof is broken doesn't mean you buy another house. It simply means you patch your roof up and you keep moving forward. And that's what Occupy Newark is. We're here to fix our community. We're here to fix our town. We're here to stabilize our neighborhood so we can continue to be part of the same neighborhood that we've always been part of.
So as part of the occupation, so to speak, there have been tents actually right outside our window in Military Park, across the street, and they're dwindling. What's going on there?
Essentially, the cold is a large portion of it. We started this occupation. A lot of us have houses. We live in the neighborhood. We live within a transitional location from here. And the idea of the physical occupation was for the homeless. There's over 2,000 people sleeping on the streets of Newark right now. The shelters have a year cap. A lot of them don't qualify. The welfare issues that they have in getting Section 8 housing. So the tents was fully intended for the homeless. Now, the city council has decided that they don't want to keep us on our 30-day lease anymore, and they submitted a letter saying that we had to be removed. And for the safety of the camp, the materials were packed up, and the people that could find somewhere to go have been relocated until we can figure out the legalities of actually permanently occupying the park.
Okay, the big tent's still, the green one's still out there. So
there's a lot of wood involved in that one. And that's an actual military tent. It has a wooden floor inside of it. It's a lot harder to dismantle that one than the smaller tents. The idea is 50,000 Newark residents to sign this petition. We won't have to dismantle any tents, and we'll be able to permanently house a lot of the homeless that already sleep in the park.
And when I say the petition, you and I spoke about that, but we've not spoken about it here. You need 50,000 signatures because that represents what?
The power of the people.
No, but specifically the percentage, right?
So it's 25% of the registered voters of Newark, the voting population of Newark. Essentially, it's the Charter of Newark states that if you can get that 25% of the people of the community to agree that an ordinance should be in whatever state it is, and in our case, they permanently remove the overnight ban in the park, then we use the power of the people to supersede the power of the city council and supersede the power of the mayor. And it's really using the voice of the community to decide what's best for the community.
Now, when they sign this, is it in order to get something on the ballot, or is that actually the number of signatures with its statement? I assume there'll be a statement on each sheet to make it an appropriate petition, so to speak.
Yes.
That those petitions alone, if they're deemed to be valid with the signatures, they would initiate the change, or does it put something on the ballot?
Essentially, the way we're trying to do it right now is that it's an electronic signature. So every single time somebody signs it, it gets mailed out to every single elected representative in this neighborhood. And at the end, we'll be able to print out all these petitions individually. It's 50,000 sheets of paper. So we chose to do electronically because of the physical expense of printing out so many papers. The charter specifies that each signature gets one whole sheet of paper. So it's going to... We haven't gotten to that bridge and figured out. I'm kind of hoping that when we do address the city council and we do address the clerk's office, it says, well, here are all the signatures. They've received an email for every single one of these petitions. They weren't submitted together, but we've equated to the number, and you've all received an email with these petitions. Is it equal to save a couple of trees?
Well, if you choose not to, our local will print it out for you, because I love the imagery of
50,000 sheets of paper.
Yeah, I think it would be great. But I think it would be worth the tree sacrifice in the name of helping people. Now you're very concerned about the recent proposal by Cammie Anderson, who is she's assigned. She's not the acting director of education.
She's the superintendent.
She's the superintendent of Newark, right? She came out of New York City?
She came out of New York City. She claims to have 21 years of educational experience, but I believe she's only about 38. So there's some questionable math issues there.
She's very prescient. She started very early.
But her reputation that follows her is that she failed the children of New York in a smaller district. She's come in here into Newark, and she's proposing to close down public schools and replace these public schools with charter schools. Privatization of our education. Now, part of this is because it's public education. She's shifting all these kids to other local public schools. We attended a meeting a couple of weeks ago where she claimed that our schools have low enrollment numbers, and that...
The ones she wants to close.
The ones that she wants to close.
Right.
They have low enrollment number and low success. Now, one of the schools, Miller Street School, has demonstrated a significant amount of improvement in the last 10 years. And none of our schools have low enrollment. They're all pretty much at max capacity. There's a lot of conflicts with the statements she made. First of all, if you're shifting all our children to additional public schools to bring in these charters, if we have low enrollment, as she claims, who's going to attend the charter schools? In essence, you're cutting away jobs from teachers, where she claims we have 100 teachers that are tenured and are being paid to stay home because there's no jobs for them, where the top 5 most successful public schools in the state of New Jersey all have 2 teachers per classroom. Her proposal was very flawed. We met her originally at a forum to discuss her proposal, where she spoke to us, did not allow us to speak back. She did not want to hear our responses. She presented us some false statistics, and we had a lot of parents and teachers from the schools in question saying, no, that's not true, that's not accurate. She was not very responsive to that, and at the end, she ran out the back door.
I didn't know she lasted that long. That's the one that was in the papers because people were yelling and all this kind of
A
stuff.
whole half hour.
Right.
A whole half hour. And so now we are mobilizing the parents and we're encouraging everyone to come join us. We have a meeting this evening with the parents and we're trying to mobilize the parents and start creating a more concrete solution.
On the 14th, St. Valentine's Day. Right.
Yes. Right. Well, dedication to change is regardless of a holiday.
Okay.
With the idea of empowering the parents to really be able to defend their children and their rights. Privatization in charter schools are not in the best interest of the children. It's not about the education, it's the profit. Statistically, when you put children through standardized tests in public schools, regardless of the failures of our current public system, our children are still being evaluated on a consecutive basis. Charter schools do not have to go through state evaluations. There's no comparing the knowledge of a child in public to charter. There's no teacher requirements outside of a degree for charter schools. There's no accountability. There's no certificate program. It's kind of putting your child into a black hole and hoping that they're going to learn something. Whereas with public schools, the parents have rights. The parents have voices. The community is still involved to a very dynamic portion of it.
Yet the charters get 90% of the state, of the funding that would have gone towards public school system. That's pulled out of the public school system.
Exactly.
But they get to wear cool uniforms.
Well, our kids wear cool uniforms too. In the last few years, we've seen the whole uniform endeavor. All the schools are wearing them now. It's simply a matter of why are you going to close one school, shift our children to another building, and then open another school in the same location? For all intent and purposes, let's just restructure our schools. Let's improve our schools. Let's bring better evaluations to your principals who are not holding your department chairs responsible for overseeing your teachers. Let's evaluate the lesson plans. Let's provide more support. My aspirations for being a teacher, I understand the dynamic of the fact that going into the public school system now, whereas 10 years ago I would have had 3-4 senior teachers that would have guided me and helped me develop my lesson plans, whereas now that's not available for the teachers. We don't have the structure. Obviously, it's because the baby boomers have retired and the whole system has gotten thrown out of whack. But the layoffs of the teachers haven't helped that issue. The proportion of money that's being funneled out of our schools, and then we question why our children aren't learning. 30 kids in a classroom is not a learning setting. It's impossible for you to teach 30 kids simultaneously. Smaller settings are always more successful. But you take out the resources and you demand more of our children. It doesn't make sense.
How many of these schools we're talking about, can you rattle them off as many as you can? I know we said Miller Street. I know Dayton Street where I went to grammar school.
It's 11 schools.
More importantly, a mutual friend of ours, Shockley, indicated that, who actually recommended you for the show, I've had him on twice, that a number of these schools are near public housing.
Every single public school being shut down has a public housing building that has recently been closed.
Yeah.
Or is to be closed.
Or is to be, like Seth Boyden, where I actually lived as a child. So you're depopulating, which we've done a whole, our local is part of a lawsuit against the Housing Authority for 21 years or so, when they tore down Columbus and they didn't replace them one for one, so it took us, and I don't think they still finished it actually. I think they're still 30-something short. But regardless, so you depopulate the public housing in order to gentrify the city further, to augment the New Jersey PACs, the new hotel, all these other niceties, which are not the worst things in the world, but by depopulating, then you're actually creating the reality that you're alleging, right, where you're saying there aren't, even though it may not be true, you're alleging there aren't sufficient number of children for these schools, but you've actually strangled the flow of children by doing away with public housing, which exacerbates the issue anyway, because then where did you go? You mentioned Section 8s. They give them Section 8s, the former tenants, but there's no real housing in the city of Newark.
There's nothing, and anything that they're building, a lot of these new structures are not meant for the people of Newark. Now, if you look at the land ordinance of last year, the 2011 City of Newark land ordinance, it states that any property built had to be in proportion to the economical situation of the community. Now, our community is making about $15,000 to $20,000 a year. So why are these new structures charging $1,000? There's a building right down the street from you where a one-bedroom apartment is $1,400. That's impossible. No one can afford that. That is not based on our community.
Is that Renaissance? Which one is that?
No, not the Renaissance. The big. It's literally, it faces us right here.
Oh, they did. They redid that one. Yeah.
That wasn't made for the community of Newark. NJ Pack was not made for the community of Newark. The Rock was not made for the people of Newark. The fact is we've spent all this money on McCarter Highway and making it pretty and designing a subway station to take the people from out of town straight to these locations and bus them right back out, but we've closed Rec Center. Our ice skating ring this year didn't even open because the ice machine was broken.
In Branchbrook, yeah?
Not in Branchbrook, the
Which
one in the Ironbound section.
Oh, right. Well, you guys always get short. I mean, besides having all the airplanes flying over you,
You
and
don't
the
mind them.
noise and the pollution from the trucks and everything else, you've got...
But how do you equate not opening up a ice skating rink? I attended that as a child. It's an ice skating rink that was free for the community. There's a swimming pool. It hasn't been open because of the machine was broken. Meanwhile, Cory Booker gave himself a $10,000 raise. Our city council members are recorded as being the highest paid city council representatives in the state of New Jersey.
Part-time, was it 85,000 or something like that? I just read the article, yeah.
80,000, I think.
80 plus for aids and transportation and cars and everything else.
Meanwhile, you're closing down rec centers. There's not one single location where the kids can go play basketball. Our boys and girls clubs are getting funneled and pushed out of town, where you're removing all the resources. There's no more after-school programs for the kids. Even though we're keeping them till 4, you don't have the after-school programs. You're allowing our children to be on the street, and then you question why the city is going in the direction it is. You're investing all your money on the tourists, but you're not giving anything back to your community. Your job creation programs have only provided our citizens with minimum wage paying jobs. Living wage is minimum $15. You're denying your community what they need, but you're encouraging other people to come in. So it's a matter of awareness. The average Newark resident, when you break down the current situation of this town, they look at you and say, well, how did we let this happen? Why did we sell the police department buildings and now we rent them back? Right. It's costing the city $60 billion for 5 years worth of renting a building we used to actually own. It's the watershed building that they're trying to sell. We're going to have to rent it back. We're still going to need water tomorrow, regardless if we own it or not.
Well, actually, what they do there is, and it's not just the city of Newark, it's done all over the country, where you have similar pressures, economic pressure. I'm not justifying it because it's wrong, but you do get short-term infusion of cash, so it helps you artificially balance your budgets, either that first year, if not further. But you're right, you end up paying for it down the road. So it's kind of myopic, but it is a short-term stopgap measure.
But then at the same time, if you're willing to sell a watershed building, your mayor shouldn't be making $135,000 a year, when your average citizen doesn't even make a third of that.
Is it so much what he makes, or is it really also how many people he has working for him?
It's all of them.
Or not working for him, as you discussed earlier. You found something looking at the budget?
It's something that's still in the works, and there's still a lot of trails to be followed. But essentially, it is a matter of don't add to one column and subtract from the other column when you're adding to your to your salary and you're subtracting from social programs. Don't say that we're in a budget deficit, but you're giving all these people these benefits. You're giving yourself. He's driving around in a personal SUV, and a couple of other elected officials are doing the same thing on the buck of the city. We have public transportation. It's one of the best in the whole state of New Jersey.
Well, playing the devil's advocate, I don't think you'd expect the mayor of a city of Newark to take public transportation. Also, there's this issue about him having been allegedly threatened regarding the gangs several years ago. So I believe I'm told he has a security contingent of some 6 to 8 people
that go with him everywhere. We've seen them because he actually came down to the park a few times with them. But it's a matter of proportion. Where are you spending the money, and where are you
priorities, right.
And when your priorities are your outsiders versus your community, it's questionable. They don't listen to the grievances of their people. They don't understand that we are suffering. And that's where Occupy started. Simply, no one's listening to us. No one cares about us. I lived in North Newark for a couple of years, and the population, this hopeless group, that's what Newark needs right now. We need hope. We need to believe that we deserve a decent standard of living, because we don't have that right now. when you're struggling, the proportion of people on welfare, they're not on welfare because they choose to be on welfare. You don't give these children opportunities. You don't give them a decent education. You don't give them jobs. And then you expect them to thrive.
1 in 5 people, literally, 1 in 5 people in the county of Essex, and that includes Newark all the way up to Roseland and all the environs in between. 1 in 5 are receiving some form of public assistance, which is a very telling number, because technically Essex is a rich county overall, if you count in the western parts of it.
You look at the national statistics, there's 1 job for every 5 Americans, or that was dated back to, I think, October was when I read that. So if 1 in 5 people are in the system and there's 1 job for every 5 people, how are we surviving? How is it that we're still rolling down this hill, but we haven't changed our policies to address these issues? They're trying to cut the Medicaid. The HUD funding has been cut. Every single year they're issuing less and less housing vouchers so that they can cut the proportions. We're down to, what, 66% last year was issued of the vouchers that were allotted to the state? How is that helping us? Who's actually seeing this money? Who's actually getting the benefit of cutting these programs? I've met 1,000 people sitting in this park across the street that all tell me the same thing. I don't know what to do. Complaints of the welfare office because they have nowhere to go. Complaints of the shelters because there's no room for them. And trying to absorb all of this and trying to really create short-term tangible solutions is very overwhelming. Occupy Newark hasn't actually done anything dynamic because as people come in, it's so overwhelming to get hit with so much grievances. There's so many conflicts. There's so many problems. You get to a point where you don't even know where to start. We've spent 3 months just feeding our homeless and giving them shelter. It's cold outside, and there's this one individual. He's in a wheelchair, and he's been with us now for about 2 weeks. And prior to him finding us here at Military Park, he slept at Penn Station. And it's just all of this comes into play, and you look, the schools are shutting down, the jobs are disappearing. What hope is there for our community right now? We started this segment with you asking me, why do we occupy Newark? And the idea is, where else do we have to go? Honestly, there are people that tell us all the time, come spring, half of our homeless population will be living in a park with us, because at least it's a meal.
Well, I've said rather cynically for many years, again, we focus on the county more than the city, but we do the city as well, our union, because we represent county employees. But I'll tell you what part of the problem is, and the problem is, and with all due respect to him, because I like him personally, I've said that many times here, I've had him on the show, but from a business perspective, the county executive, and the freeholders just go in tow, but the county executive has not really paid any attention to social services in this county at all. All the focus has been upon, similar with Newark, the gentrification aspects of, and he says, money-making aspects of, allegedly, the zoo, the parks, the county parks, and the golf courses. And social services have been ignored for a number of reasons. I think part of the reason is similar to what you just alluded, that it's such a big problem, it's impossible to get your hands around it and start, it seems, as to cogently start affecting it. Whereas it's not hard to create an exhibit for $2 million for 2 monkeys, which is what they did, you know, or a miniature golf course, or a big fancy restaurant. But meanwhile, you have people, I just passed 18 Rector Street, where the building, 10 Park Place, 18 Rector, most of our members work. People are lined up in the cold waiting to get into the building. Why? Because the economy tanked in 2008. We haven't seen the overall number of employees, the Division of Welfare is supposed to be 822. It's never reached that level in years, even though it's supposed to legally. And that goes back to an agreement that's a bogus agreement from 1996, 97. Just think of how exponentially the caseloads have grown, and you still have the same number of employees, but you really don't even have them because you don't reach the number. So when you talk about client complaints, our members are extremely frustrated because they don't have the numbers of people to do it. They don't, in the food stamp office, they don't have workable printers. You have 12 people on one printer. And think how labor intensive and paper intensive still the job is. So you're right, it seems overwhelming, but I found that if you pick 1, 2, or the magic Greek number of 3 things and just focus upon them and try to do your best you can. I'm not preaching, I'm just saying that I found that to be effective over the years that I've been working in the social service community. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but you really do have to do a laser type focus. The health benefit issue is very interesting because I just saw online where I sent it to our members actually this morning, an article saying that in the private sector, the number of employees providing health benefits has again dropped. It continues to drop. It's about 44, 43%. And so even in the private sector, you have people with decent jobs not providing health benefits as part of the package, which is insane.
And the rising cost of healthcare.
Right.
I myself, I haven't had health insurance now in about 4 years, 4 or 5 years. I can't. I've always worked for small employers, and they can't afford to pay my health benefits, and I've just been surviving. And it's through social programs like the office on William Street that I can actually see a doctor on a regular basis.
That's the city welfare office, right?
It's still, yes.
It used to be. I know maybe they moved.
It's not the welfare office. It's actually up the street from where the welfare office is.
Up the hill.
It's the medical clinic.
Right.
And it's through these programs, but they're getting their budgets cut. They're getting their fundings reduced. But the amount of residents that I've personally told, well, you know what, if you go over there, they'll work with you. You'll see a doctor. You don't have to be sick and not have options. And it's about community, and it's about addressing the fact that we need health care, and we shouldn't have to pay an arm and a leg and a couple of toes just to see a doctor when you're sick.
Ironic example in terms of arms and legs and toes in healthcare. But what would you like to see the viewers and the general community, both those that live here and don't live here, particularly those that don't live here, up in the Millburns and the South Oranges and the Maplewoods and up the hill in Montclairs and even further up in Roseland, what would you like to see them do?
I encourage everyone to start reoccupying their civic space. Start recognizing what your elected representatives are doing. Start scrutinizing their actions. It's about, if every single town in every single state in the United States, in every single country around the world, the civilian population re-enter their civic space and start holding their elected representatives accountable for the fact that they're there to represent you, we are going to have the international change that Occupy is demanding. I've met people from Occupy around the world. I'm working with a man from Libya. I'm working with an occupation down in Brazil, and with the idea that this is an international movement. We are all addressing our local communal issues, and even small towns like Millburn have issues. They have conflicts, maybe not to the proportion of Newark, but they do have things that need to be addressed within their own community.
They're having issues. They're having a lot of break-ins in vehicles and stuff. They're starting to
They're starting to
problems.
feel it.
Yeah.
And if everyone reoccupies their civic space, support your police officers because they have a hard job. Support your teachers because they're educating your youth. Support your firefighters. They're saving lives. And start introducing this sense of community. We're going to change the world, but we're going to have to change it together. And it's about everyone becoming aware that it's through the smallest of issues. It's being involved in your child's school, as mundane as that might appear to a lot of people. But when you address what's going on within your community, you have more sense of control as things fall apart, so you don't end up in the situation as Newark has. Newark ended in the hole that it is right now because people vacated their civic space. They allowed their elected representatives to do whatever they wanted for all these years, and now we're turning around and we're recognizing that they did not make the best of decisions. And this is a pattern that we're seeing everywhere around the world. And it's about civic engagement and returning to community.
Arab uprising, Greece, everywhere. You're absolutely right. Well, Angela, thank you for joining us on Labor's View, and wish you the best of luck with Occupy Newark, and whatever we can do to be further of assistance, our union would be happy to be there.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us on Labor's View. I'm David Weiner, President of Local 1081 CWA, and we hope to see you on future shows.